Hello. As part of World Book Day, I'm going to take you through 3 books that I've read, 1 that I'm currently reading, and 2 that I'm about to read. And I'll take you through my thinking behind those authors and why I enjoy them so much. What I would like to say to you is that reading is so important. The more you read, the better you will do in school for sure. My first book is Natives by Akala. It's incredible. I love books that make you think differently and that challenge you. And I've got a reasonably good understanding of history. I've taught history for 20 years and I've read history for my whole life. But this book really challenged me and it really shook me outside my comfort zone and it made me think. And for that reason, this would be my first recommendation. I thoroughly enjoyed reading this, but at times it was quite hard to read because it reminds you of a lot of the really difficult things in the history of our own country and how we really need to come to terms with them. Sticking with the historical theme, this time a novel. It's Ken Follett and it's The Evening and the Morning, and it's the latest of his novels and they're all about history. I've read all of his 20th century ones, all of his medieval and Tudor ones, and then this one is a prequel to a trilogy that I read, and it's amazing. And I think he's left himself room to put in another novel next about the Norman conquest and how England was after William the Conqueror. So that I'm really looking forward to. Yeah, I hope he does do that. This book is amazing, and again, it makes you think a bit differently about history. It invites you to imagine what it was like for people at the time and how they saw things. So it's one thing to find out about history from textbooks. It's another to imagine it through characters, and I think history is all about empathy. If you can view history through the eyes of others, you'll understand it better. Now, this is quite a controversial book, but it's completely amazing. And again, a bit like some of the other books, it completely changed the way that I view history. This is The Book of Trespass by Nick Hayes. He's a writer and illustrator, and he actually trespasses. He goes around the country going on land and just making the point that he can go on that land. He invites you to think differently about how the world and how the land is owned, and he looks at countries like Scandinavia and even Scotland, where the land may technically belong to one person, but everyone in a sense has a right to the land and to get the most out of the land in the country where they live. He takes you back to the time of William the Conqueror and just before that, where land was owned differently. And then with the bringing of the feudal system and land ownership and the hunting rights and terrible punishments for people who trespassed, horrible physical mutilations and death. And he takes you all the way through history, through important things like the time of Cromwell and the levellers and the diggers, and takes you all the way through to the 20th century with the Greenham Common protests, and tells you that basically the land is all of ours and it's there to be enjoyed. It's completely fascinating, and I'd really recommend it. It's a hard read and it's quite politically controversial for some, but for me it was completely fascinating. And I think to really enjoy books, you have to be prepared to take on ideas that challenge your own. This one definitely does that. This is the book I'm currently reading. It's Hurdy-Gurdy by Christopher Wilson. I've never heard of him before, but he has written quite a lot of very successful books. This is all about a monk who's around in medieval times, and he's in a monastery just as the plague, the Black Death, hits England. And it doesn't sound like a very easy read, but it's actually hilarious. And again, it gets you to think differently about what life was like at the time and how they viewed things. And he makes really amusing comparisons between past and present through the character, far away imagined things in the future that we know to be true and to really have happened. It's hard to explain it more than that, but I've really enjoyed it and I've laughed out loud several times during this book. It's surprising you'd say something like that about a book about the plague, but I really would recommend this book. It's brilliant. This is my next book, so when I finished Hurdy-Gurdy, I'm going to go on to Robert Harris V2. I'm sure some of you will know, again, this is the historical link, the V2 rocket bombs were absolutely devastating during the Second World War. And just as Britain was starting to be part of the winning side in the war, Hitler's revenge was to launch these rocket bombs. They're the forerunners of the intercontinental ballistic missiles that we have today. And one of the guys who worked on these rocket bombs went on to be part of the Apollo space missions in the 1960s that put the man on the moon in 1969. All of Robert Harris's books have been incredible. He's written 3 books about Cicero in ancient Rome, and they're completely fascinating, very readable. He's written a book about Pompeii, and Fatherland is by him, and Enigma is by him as well, which is an incredible book. And the last one I read by him was Munich, about the Munich Agreement in 1938. I'm really looking forward to this book. They've never let me down. They've always been amazing. And again, we've got that historical themes running through there. And finally, when I've finished with Robert Harris, I shall be on to Jonathan Coe, Mr. Wilder and Me. I have no idea what this book's about, but I'm really looking forward to it. I've absolutely loved every book by Jonathan Coe. He was born and bred in the Midlands, same as me. A lot of the references to the localities in his books I often recognise. He wrote an incredible book, Middle England, that I've just read, and it's all about how England has been on this really strange journey since 2012 with the London Olympics and this big celebration of all things British. And then that strange journey we've been on since then. But he really tried to explain a lot of things that have happened in that book, and he did it really convincingly. And again, it was with references to the Midlands and the Longbridge car plant and its demise. And anyway, completely fascinating. What a Carve Up is a great book to start with by him. He's taken an old 1960s film and turned it into a really entertaining whodunit book. But the other ones, I've just got them written down here: House of Sleep, Rotters Club, Closed Circle, and number 11. They're all amazing books. I'd really strongly recommend reading all of those. So that's the one I'm looking forward to, next book but one. I hope you get something out of the selection I've given you. I strongly recommend all of these books, and most of all, I recommend that you read as much as possible. It's probably the single biggest thing you can do to make a difference to your education, and it will definitely broaden the mind, and it will support your future lives when you travel and meet new interesting people. Books will give you an extra insight that will carry you a long way in your lives.